2016. He is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering at Bennett University, Greater Noida. He has a teaching experience of more than 11 years. His research interest includes image retrieval, Fourier decomposition methods, its applications, molecular communication, and next generation communication system. It's a great pleasure to have you, sir, as speaker in our short term training program. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Okay, so let me share my. A very good morning to all the participants. So, I happen to be a person who is working in both the domains, communications as well as image processing. So, today I would like to understand with you that what role is image processing nowadays. So, we have known some traditional image processing systems, but as we are progressing in communication area, how does the role of image processing increase, and what are the next generation applications, and what is the state of communications? So first, that is the first thing I would like to understand, right? So we'll start now. This is the brief outline of the presentation, where I first want to talk about communication systems, how we have progressed, and where we stand currently, and what i- what are the plans for us as a country going in the near future. Then something about image processing, and followed by that I would be focusing on one of the areas in image processing, that is retrieval, and some results on that. This is going to be the brief outline for the presentation. Okay, so the first thing, now let us briefly go through that what we understand by a communication system, and where did we start, where do we stand right now. So communication, it is by definition transfer of data, transfer of voice data, or in some an absolute sense we simply say an exchange of information. An exchange of information can be simply referred as communication. Communication, when you talk to another person face to face, even that is a communication. So communication does not necessitate that it should be using through some gadgets, or there should be an entire system in place. So those things slowly and slowly came into practice, because we understood that we cannot always be talking to somebody in person. Sometimes the person could be located at a place which is far off from where we are located. Still, if you want to communicate, so essentially we are referring still at communication, but that is where the field of telecommunication comes in, right? So when you're trying to communicate with somebody who's at a distance, that is essentially a telecommunication. Now there have been various systems which we used. The most primitive communication system that we have used is the landline telephones, and they still exist. It's not like they have been pushed out of the system. So that is the most earlier way that we have seen. Even currently we people have also seen in our earlier days. So landline telephone, it was specifically meant for only voice. So you could only talk to another person, you could call up a number, and you could speak up to another person. So there was no other facility available in that, right? So with that, if you talk about the generations of communication systems, so the earlier generations could be said as 1G and 2G, first generation and second generation communication systems. So they primarily focused on voice. And then a little later on, when the mobile phones came in and their use started becoming popular, then SMS came in, or the messaging services in general that we call them. So the earlier generation communication systems were primarily meant for voice and messaging. But then came the phones which could use internet. So that started with the introduction of 3G, which was around the year of 2000. That third generation was launched, and it was able to provide higher speed, higher data rates. Now, if you are only using voice, if you only want to make a voice call, then these data rates essentially do not make any contribution to that. So, what is happening there onwards is that communication is now voice and data, and this data means a lot of things. So, the ability to send data which is not voice. So, as that came in, then the capabilities enhanced many folds of what we can do. Internet penetration increased. So we were able to access internet from our phone. Earlier, people had to go, if they want to use internet, they had to go to an internet cafe. Or some people would have a dial-up connection at home. So they're having a landline telephone, they'll purchase a modem, and they'll set up a system through that. So the same line was being used in both ways. Then slowly came the broadband. So broadband said that yes, now you can use multiple systems in the same house or in the same complex. Some of them could be based on voice, some of this could be simply data, or maybe a combination of voice and data. So that is where the data started coming in. Yes, that there is something known as data, there is something known as internet, right? And to access internet, you need data, transfer of data. Then in the era of 3G and 4G, that is, I'm talking about the last 15 to 20 years, we have been using a lot of applications on our smartphones. So, smartphones is like owning a phone. Now, nobody talks about a feature phone or a simple phone which is not even capable of using internet. So, nowadays, when you say phone, it simply means a smartphone. And our entire world has come into this single device, which we are referring to as smartphones. With everything that we wish to do is being fulfilled by means of some or the other application. Now, if somebody says that you live without smartphone for a week, then that is like, why? I mean, this is a huge paralysis. How can I survive without a smartphone? So, okay. So, now what we were saying is that smartphones have become a norm in every household. Everybody owns one, and they are able to use a lot of applications on that. How has that been possible? By allowing high speed data usage through our mobile subscription. And nowadays, even voice is not having a separate channel. So even voice is going over data networks. So the traditional voice networks, which used to carry only voice, right? Slowly we are not using them that much, and we are migrating to data networks. So networks which were carrying data for us, now the same data is also being used to carry voice as well, right? So what we refer to as VoIP, voice over IP. So nowadays voice is also going over data. So essentially our mobile subscription for us only means transfer of data, be it voice or any internet or any application, whatever kind of data. Then after 3G and 4G, now this year 2020, it has been marked for the launch of 5G services across the world. Now, when you go to 3G to 4G to 5G, what is changing? Is it a big change in the quality of voice? I don't think so. I think the voice quality was pretty good when we were using landline telephones as well. So then what has changed? So the data speed, how much data you can send, right? And how fast is that? That is the primary way how the 3G to 4G to 5G migration is impacting the customer, is impacting us as a user. So 5G is talking about speeds like 1 Gbps or even more than that, right? So that is a huge amount of data. Right now, we would be having plans which would say that you can use 1 GB data per day, 2 GB data per day, or something like that. In 5G, what I'm saying here, 1 Gbps per second. So this is a huge jump once again. So this is the potential that could be there, and with this potential comes a lot of applications that now will become possible, right? Then also we are talking about something known as URLLC. URLLC is ultra reliable, low latency communications. So low latency is required so that you can get real time experience. So if it is a slow connection, then there are delays. Sometimes even nowadays, if you are trying to do a call over internet, there are delays. You are speaking something and it reaches the other person after some time. So that is very annoying. Nobody wants that. What we want is low latency. So real time. Before you can realize the data transfer has gone, it has been completed. Also, what we want is high reliability. So why would high reliability be required? So when you talk about many applications, then some of them are critical applications, which are very much sensitive to your reliability and latency. For example, what has now become possible is to perform a surgery remotely. So if you're performing a surgery remotely, I believe all of us can understand how much is reliability and latency important, right? So URLLC makes possible again a very huge set of applications. Then massive broadband and IoT. These would again become possible using 5G. So IoT is like everything is connected via internet. All the data is on the cloud. You don't have to store it with yourself. So everything is connected. Every device can talk to every other device, right? So the devices are talking to each other, and all kinds of data can be accessed, can be stored anytime, anywhere. Okay. Then This is regarding data speeds. Now, how does artificial intelligence come into? So, what we have grown is not only in terms of communication technologies or in terms of how much data we can send. The growth has also been in terms of computational resources. So high-end computations are also possible now. And banking on that, what we have done is we are now using an entire new domain, a very powerful one of artificial intelligence. So this is where the machines become smarter. So you tell them that if this happens, then this has to be done. So this is the classical way that you program them, you train them, this has to be done. And then you make them smart enough to learn on a continuous basis. So you give them an initial bit of learning and then you leave them that as the situation changes, perhaps you can understand that what is the best thing to be done. So you give them the capability to make a decision. So artificial intelligence comes in. Now how does that help? Sometimes the entire communication network might be doing something which is creating a problem in the efficiency, but you cannot look into it as a person. You are sitting far away. But if you build some artificial intelligence systems, then a regular monitoring can be done, that this is going right, this is not right, there is some problem here, something has to be done here. Immediate, right? Real time fault detection and correction. So that is what artificial intelligence can do on the network side. It can highly increase the efficiency part. How does artificial intelligence favor me as a user? So in communication systems, there is a very popular term, we call it QoS. QoS is quality of service. But currently, we are talking about QoE. So QoE is quality of experience. So as a user, while I am using a service, what is the quality I experience? If I am watching a video online, am I happy with my experience? Or there are glitches, there are delays, some frames get skipped. So what is my experience? The system is doing its bit by providing a QoS, but as a user, what is my experience? Can that be enhanced? If yes, then why not? So these things come in the domain for artificial intelligence. I'm just touching upon them slightly, won't be going much into this. But artificial intelligence and machine learning are becoming a very integral part of the networks from here onwards. So for all 5G and beyond. Now this was a brief about the communication systems that we have. Now we should also understand that this is how the technology has grown, but where do we stand as a country? So what has happened for us is that we were many years late in adoption of 4G services. So let me share a very short incident that happened with me. So I was attending a conference in Washington DC in 2014, more towards the end of 2014. So in that conference, there were a lot of discussions about 5G. I'm talking about 2014, 6 years back. So there were a lot of discussions about 5G there. Now I had gone there from India and I became very curious. I said, what is this 5G? We are using 3G services in India. and people are talking about 5G. So out of curiosity, I happen to ask that we are using 3G. You're talking about 5G. Is there no 4G? So then I was told that what are you talking about? We have been using 4G for many years. So the developed countries, right, are like 5 years ahead of us. So while all of us know that 4G came into India very recently, right? So it was almost 4 to 5 years late than probably the rest of the world. But that is past now. Right now, we are trying to catch with the rest of the world for launch of 5G services. And India has become a partner in deciding the various standards and protocols to go for the next generation communication, right? So this is for the country, right? But we also need to understand that within the country, again, there is a divide. So there are some urban areas and there are rural areas. So we say that we have adopted 4G services, we are going for 5G services, but still there are a lot of call drops. Right now, everybody is facing it. The, I cannot say that the service is very good. I cannot guarantee that the connection will not break before I end this talk of mine, right? So there are no user guarantees. There is a gap between the adoption and the actual implementation. Many areas in the country are still having only 2G or 3G connectivity. They don't know what's 4G still, right? So that is the actual status. So we living in the urban areas might be able to use 4G services, but that is not the case everywhere, right? So the government of India has launched this program. It is not now. It has been launched some years back. So it is called BharatNet. So BharatNet is a program which is meant to connect the unconnected. So the rural or the remote areas of the country which are currently lagging in terms of their connectivity, so they are now being connected, right? So there is a national optical fiber network which is being deployed to provide high speed data services to remote areas of the country. Further, for the Indian cause, in 5G, we have been able to push LMLC as a standard. LMLC is low mobility large cell. So what happens in 5G is that the cell size. Now, cell size, when we say cell size, we mean that how much area can a mobile tower service. That is a very rough definition for a cell. So now the cell size reduces from 3G to 4G to 5G. The cell size reduces. So LMLC said that we as a country are happy to have a larger cell size, even though we are not able to support very high mobility. So it's not like people are moving very fast within that area. So the movements are slow, but the coverage has to be more. So this has been pushed as a standard from the Indian perspective in 5G. Then we are also using TV white spaces and long range Wi-Fi systems to reach the remote areas. Now TV white spaces is I am not sure if you people have noticed it sometime, but while you're watching the TV channels, if you try to scan through the channels, every channel is essentially a frequency band. It is occupying a frequency band which is of some megahertz, right? So TV transmission, so that channels are occupying some bands at some megahertz of frequencies, but there are some slots in between, frequency slots, which are unused. That is what we are referring to as TV white spaces. So a band of frequencies traditionally being used for TV transmission, but being idle at some places, so they can be used. So these long range Wi-Fi and TV white spaces, and probably some more technologies. So now these are being explored. They have been already deployed in some parts of the country to reach the far-fetched areas, right? And why we are doing this? So as a country, our target is to get high-speed internet access for all mobile subscribers at low cost, right? So it's true that we are migrating from 3G to 4G to 5G, but we also need to keep in mind people who still remain unconnected. And to them, it doesn't make a difference whether it is 2G, 3G, 4G, they're still using the same set of services, right? So we want to reach them as well. So just another lot of services which can really help them. For example, e-administration and utility bill payment. So I mean, just sitting at your home using your smartphone, you can pay all the bills. You can access a lot of administrative services, government services. Then e-education can help improve the literacy rates in those areas and also boost their employability. E-health, as the name says, would lead to a better health amongst the rural population. E-commerce, e-finance, then agriculture 4.0 to helping them increasing their agriculture produce. And of course, when you have internet, you get access to infotainment services. So you may also be able to attend some training programs which are being conducted like this, like the one we are doing right now. So this could also become possible for the rural areas. So some of the applications that we can have in the rural population. So this is what I had, just a brief about the communication systems, so that we understand that where have we come from and what is the current status in the world and also to our own country as a specific. Now, image processing. So how does image processing fit in, right? Now, as I said, that voice has been used since 1G. This was the first basic service why the systems were developed. And voice does not require any high speed data, right? So as you move from 1G to 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, your data rate is the primary component which is increasing, but it is not required for the voice. Why is it required then? It is required to handle the multimedia content, right? So if you're accessing a website, if you're uploading, downloading some files, you're uploading some photos, you are live streaming a video. So whatever image or video based services you are using, they are the ones which consume a lot of data. So you watch a movie online and your 1 GB data is gone. You talk to person for 1 hour, do you consume that much of data? No, right? So please understand that as we are going from one to the next generation, we are increasing the data rates. Now these data rates are essentially enabling some new applications, right? And most of them are using, in some sense, images or video based data, right? And why these services now? Because high speed data allows real time transmission, right? High speed data allows real time transmission of images and videos. If it is not high speed, it won't work. Even it works, it would be a very poor quality, right? And also high speed computational resources. So we talked about this a little earlier also, that we have progressed not only in terms of data rates but also in terms of computational resources. So these computational resources allow real time processing. So this data can be actually processed before the communication happens. So those real time processors have become possible by our growth in terms of computational resources, right? So for this, we have to understand now what exactly do we mean by image processing, because first I helped you understand why is this becoming an integral component of the communication, right? Now let us see what essentially we mean by image processing, and where is this all this data coming from, right? So a lot of data nowadays is getting collected in the form of images, right? All the information is available in your smartphone. So if you want to look up for anything, you want to search for anything, what do? You simply access internet over your phone, you make a search, maybe you also check some photos or videos, right? All the information is available here in your smartphone. And information is getting captured in the form of images. How? Suppose you want to share a document with somebody. What do? You click a photograph, send it in. Send it over a communication platform or maybe over email, WhatsApp, whatever. But it is so convenient. Simply click it and send it. But by doing it, you are creating data in the form of images, right? Earlier, it was not possible. Were we capturing so many images 20 years ago? No. 20 years ago, we used to carry that camera with us, which used to have a roll. And it was like you can have what? Maybe 30 photographs, 60 photographs out of this. That's it. But nowadays, you don't carry camera. You carry a smartphone and you don't count the number of photos you click, right? So what has changed? The capturing of image has changed. It has become so much more convenient, and the storage has changed. So the storage has all become digital. So I don't have to carry a separate device to store the images. It all getting stored as I capture them, right? So the ease, the convenience has really added to this of creating and storing this data, right? What kind of data we are collecting? So when you visit a hospital and you're asked to go through a test, radiology test, then that is creating an image. Whether it is a CT, MRI, ultrasound, X-ray, it is creating an image, right? Then whatever paintings or the online videos that you watch, films which are uploaded over internet, TV series, web series, there's Netflix, Amazon Prime. What is this? This is entire data in terms of images and videos. Then another change that has happened is CCTV cameras. So now you have CCTV cameras placed at so many locations. What are they doing? They are creating another set of data in the form of images and videos again. So surveillance systems working round the clock are creating that amount of data. And with the use of high speed data, you are able to view that feed remotely in real time, right? Then biometrics. So fingerprint, face based detection, face recognition, right? Many smartphones are also using the fingerprint recognition nowadays. Some are using face recognition as well. Even now, we're talking about using them at the airports as an identity check. So, how is this going to happen? We have to create that database. Satellites which have gone into outer space, what are they doing? They are capturing images and sending it back to Earth so that we can see what is happening in the outer space, right? And of course, there are many others which we capture ourselves while we are on a vacation or in general, whatever we feel like, right? There's so many images which are getting created nowadays, right? Now, what is an image? So, image is simply a 2D data which is stored as an array of pixels. So you have a x-axis, you have a y-axis. This is a very rough definition I'm giving. And suppose you arrange it into m rows and n columns, and I call it a m cross n image. So a m cross n image would have a total of mn pixels, and each of these pixel is represented by an intensity value, right? So each of the pixel has a value assigned to it. We call it the intensity value at that pixel. So all of these mn pixels would hold some intensity value, and when you look at them together, you can see an image, right? Now this is the rough definition for an image. Now we also need to understand at the same time, we say that this is a very high quality image, this is a low quality image, this is a very high resolution, low resolution. What is the meaning of that? So if you can pack more pixels per unit of space, right? That means you're getting into more details. You're making it even more finer, right? So packing more number of pixels per unit of space is essentially what means to a higher resolution image, right? So when you're using a higher megapixel camera that is able to capture more pixels per unit of space, and it eventually leads to a high resolution image. So when the image increases in resolution, does it also increase in size? Yes, it does. Why? Maybe I'll leave it to you to figure it out. Okay. Then the images that we are seeing are mostly colored images. So color images have three planes, whether it is RGB, HSV, YCB, CR. So I mean they have different planes, these color images, as opposed to a grayscale image, which would just be a collection of black and white and some intensities in between. So shades of gray. Okay. So that is why we're calling it a grayscale image. So for a grayscale image, you simply need a single plane and every pixel holds an intensity value. And if that intensity value, if you're talking about, usually we use a 8-bit representation. So a 0 means black and a 255 means white. So whatever is the intensity value between 0 and 255, it will give you a particular shade for gray, right? 0 is black, highest, which is 255, that is white. So this is what we mean by image. How do you represent a image? Now, when you talk about a image processing system, now how does a system look like? So first you have to acquire an image. Now this image could be analog or digital. If it is analog, then you have to make it digital by doing a sampling and quantization. Then there is a certain bit of pre-processing required if the image captured has some noise, so that noise has to be removed. If you are looking for a particular dimension of the image, then you have to resize the image. Then sometimes you also have to go for enhancement. So the image is there. So just to help you understand the enhancement bit, when you capture an image using your phone or maybe a scanner, when you're capturing an image of a document, so after capturing the image, you have a tendency to use an automatic feature of enhancement. And after that, you see that yes, now the image looks much better. So there is some kind of processing going on between the two steps, which leads to a image which is more enhanced, looks more clear as compared to the earlier. So some bit of pre-processing. Then depending on the application, maybe you need to separate out some components from the image. Maybe you need to remove the background, or you need to pull out a particular object. So suppose you're looking for face detection, then you have to first detect the face in the image. So you have to pull out the face from the entire image. And then after you have done that, then you need some kind of representation, a feature representation for whatever object or the image you're talking about. So you come up with a representation in terms of features. So that is what is being referred here, feature extraction. And then finally, once you have got that this is the object or this is the part of the image I'm looking at, and these are the features I have extracted from this part, on the basis of those features, we can get result. So whether that is a classification or a simple image description or identification of a certain object or a person. So this is a typical image processing system. That these are the kind of steps that need to be done. Then various applications that we can have with image processing. So I just spoke about one, document handling or enhancement. Then if you go one step further, then we also use OCR, that is optical character recognition. So if you have a scanned document, you can actually read that what is the text which is written there. You can recognize the character. Then biometrics, that is another application for image only, because as we said, fingerprints, face, so those come under this thing. Then object or target identification. Many times we are given this task. For example, a traffic monitoring system or automatic challan system. Nowadays, I don't know how much many of you have experienced, but there are automatic challan systems. It has been implemented in some parts. So there is a camera which clicks a photograph. From the photograph, the number plate is extracted and the number of the car is extracted. Then searching from the database, it extracts the owner details, and whatever offense has been committed, the challan details get communicated to you. So this is all image processing, right? Then target identification, maybe, I mean, this is military applications. So you are capturing a video feed, from there you identify a target, and then you act accordingly. Compression, this is very important. So when you are sending data, it's not like you simply send it just like that. A bit of compression is required. For example, to help you understand this, an image, right, can have multiple extensions: JPEG, PNG, TIFF, and many others, right? What does this denote? It actually denotes different compression and representation formats. Similarly, for video, you can have AVI, MP4, MPEG, dot dat. There are many formats for video as well, FLV. So these formats represent different levels of compression and representation, right? And why is this important? Because raw data consumes a lot of space. If you compress it before communication, then you can use your system more efficiently. Why send so much data when the same job can be done by sending lesser amount of data? Activity recognition. Now, this could also be used in surveillance systems where we are trying to automatically monitor if some wrong activity is happening. Could also be used in biometric systems. Can also be used to check intrusion. Could also be used for gesture recognition. So something that you are making a gesture, from the image and video of the person making the gesture, you're trying to understand what is being communicated. Many others. Disease detection, this is for biomedical images. Again, the CT, MRI, those kind of images. So there are a lot of softwares that now exist which can go through those scans and perhaps comment on the disease that is or is not there, right? So there are many applications of image processing. Last but not the least, there is also an application called as retrieval. And from here onwards, I would like to talk a little more about image retrieval. Now, what does image retrieval mean? So retrieval means you try to fetch something. So in a very layman terms, image retrieval essentially means a search based on an image. So I give an image as an input and I search. On the basis of the input image, I am given a output, right? I get a output that is also in the terms of images, right? This is the image retrieval system which we understand, but traditionally this search was being done by using keywords. So you would type something and the keywords would be matched from whatever entries exist, and accordingly the results will be fetched. Now, where do these keywords come from? So either they would be extracted from the caption of the images, or maybe somebody has to do the annotations that this image is related to these 4 5 keywords, right? And on the basis of keywords, the search would be permitted. This is a traditional image retrieval system, right? A text-based image retriever. And when you search for similarity, the image with the maximum similarity is your best match. And then in the decreasing order of similarity match, you will publish the results back to the user. Some of the commercial examples for image retrieval systems, the traditional one is Corbis, which was founded in 89 and is now a collection of over 100 million photos. Another one was Getty Images, which is archive of over 200 million photos. And both the systems initially allowed search by keywords, but they evolved. With time, the systems evolved. Because what was the problem faced in the traditional system is who will do the annotations? You're talking about millions of photographs. So you actually have to put up that much man force to do these annotations. Then what language you use for annotation? As a person, I want to make the annotation in my local language, right? But that may not work if you're developing a system which can be used worldwide. Then the annotations have to be done in a single language. Now, my perception about an image can be different from your perception. So I may put some four keywords, you may have some different four keywords. Now that is a problem. I want a certain image to be described the same way. And sometimes looking at the image, it is not that easy. There are some abstract images, some paintings maybe. So how do you put keywords to that? So there were some many problems which were faced for text-based search. So then came the CBIR, content-based image retrieval systems. So now what it says is, given an image, from the image you generate a definition, a feature representation of the image. So when you come up with a representation of an image, then this particular representation would be compared with the other images, and on the basis of this feature comparison will come up with the similarity, and results be retrieved in the order of their similarity. These are some popular CBIR systems. QBIC has been developed by IBM and it is currently being used also in some places. Then there is a Viraj Inc. group which also became active around the same time. Then later on there was a system Visual Seek which was developed by University of Columbia. These are just some examples of existing CBIR systems. Okay, see this is the most important part. So this is not something specific to retrieval, but whenever you're talking about image processing, then this is the most important part. How do you extract the features? What kind of features do you extract? Because if the features are not able to capture the essence of the image, then when you're using those features for any further processing, the accuracy would be poor. But if you can come up with a very accurate representation of the image in terms of features, then wherever you use these features, you will get very high accuracy. Whether it is a classification, whether it is a retrieval, whether it is identification, in all the applications, right? So now what kind of features? Very popular initial ones is given a image, you compute what is the mean value, you compute what is the variance, or you draw the histogram for the image. Histogram is just like a distribution of intensity values. So we refer to them as global features captured from the image, right? But the problem, why do we have to look at the image as a whole? Sometimes by doing a averaging over the image, I might lose the local information, right? So global features do not do justice to the local structures present in the image. So for that, you have to use local patterns. They provide the most relevant information about the image, right? So now feature extraction by itself is very vast, right? And a lot of features have been discussed in literature, used in a variety of applications. But in the field of retrieval, I am going to focus on a very popular set of features known as pattern based features. So pattern based features are essentially trying to develop out of the local variations in the image. So we call that the texture information. And when you use this texture information in combination with the color information, then you get a better feature description. Now, pattern based features. So let us spend some 5-10 minutes over this. Just some popular pattern based features which have been proposed and extensively used in a variety of applications. First one is LBP, local binary pattern. Then LTP, local ternary pattern. And then after LTP came LTCOP, local ternary co-occurrence pattern. These are the popular patterns. I mean, there have been many more, but if you understand the basic ones, then the others are very easy to follow. So this illustration would help you understand what do you mean by LBP. So if you look at a 3x3 section from the image, then there is a center pixel, which in this case is 40, and then you have 8 neighbors around it. So you have 8 neighbors around your center pixel. So what I'm saying is that you simply compare these two values. I say 78 is more than 40. Since this is higher, I assign it a 1. Then I say 55 is more than 40, so I assign it a 1. Then 12 is less, so I give it a 0. 8 is less, 0, and so on. So I just compare the intensity value of the neighbor with the center pixel. If the value is more, I put it as 1. If it is less, I put it as 0. So this is binary, right? So that is why the name binary. So either 1 or 0. Then we are essentially reading it as a 8-bit binary number. these 8 binary values are being read as a 8-bit binary number, and accordingly these weights are assigned. So this becomes the MSB most significant bit because I am assigning it the highest binary weight, and this one becomes the lowest LSB. I am assigning it the least weight. Then reading it as a 8-bit number, I get a decimal value. Right? So you simply compare the intensity values of the neighbors with the center pixel, put them a 1 or 0, then understand all these 8 bits as a binary number, convert it to decimal. This is LBP. Now in LTP, this is ternary. So from binary to ternary. So I want to have 3 levels. Why only 1 and 0? So in LTP, we say 1, 0, minus 1. If it is greater than 1, if it is equal, then 0. If it is less, then minus 1. So here if you can see, 24 becomes minus 1 because 24 is less than 30. 30 becomes 0 and 34 becomes plus 1. Right? So ternary pattern. Then what we say is that let us separate out the minus and the plus. So the minus ones are being brought here in the lower pattern. The plus ones are being taken here in the upper pattern. So you essentially break this into 2 binary patterns. One corresponding to plus 1 and another corresponding to minus 1. So you break it down into plus 1 and minus 1 pattern, and again do the same thing. Convert it into a decimal number. So LTP is different from LBP because we consider 3 levels instead of 2. Then comes LTCOP. This is again going another step from LTP. So we are saying that why consider only 8 neighbors? Let us go another level and consider neighbors at a distance 2. So now this same LTP exercise is being done for 3 cross 3 neighborhood and also for 5 cross 5 neighborhood. Right? And then you compare. So you say co-occurrence. So minus 1 occurs in both 3 cross 3 and 5 cross 5. So if it occurs in both, you keep it, otherwise you drop it. For example, here this is 0 and 1. Since they do not match, I take a 0. This is 1 and 1. They match, so I take a 1. 1 and 1, so I take a 1. Here minus 1 and 0 is taken as 0. 1 and minus 1 again 0. Both minus 1. So both minus 1 will give me a. So it is just going a further neighborhood distance. Rather than considering only 3 cross 3, you are considering a 5 cross 5 neighborhood. And then you are trying to see whether the same trend continues. From 3 to 5 neighborhood, does the same trend continue? So co-occurrence. Is the trend similar between the 3 cross 3 and 5 cross 5 neighborhood? If yes, you keep it. Otherwise, you drop it. This is what we refer to as co-occurrence pattern. Then again you separate it into plus 1 and minus 1 and the same thing. Right? So these are the 3 basic patterns: LBP, binary, then LTP 3 level. In LTCOP it is 3 level but considering a larger neighborhood. I'll skip these. These are some more advanced patterns which exist. another one. So I am skipping these advanced patterns for now. Now we have discussed some of the patterns which are used to describe the image. Now on the basis of this, we want retrieval, right? So the retrieval results are measured like this. So if you retrieve 10 images and 7 of them are precisely what you wanted, or they belong to the same category, so your precision is what? 7 and 10, 70%. The precision becomes the primary criteria of evaluating how good or bad is your feature performing. Okay, so relevant images as a function of total number. These are some popular databases which exist, which are used to check how good or bad your feature is. So there are some face data sets, medical data sets, texture, natural. Now, why would you use it? Here, I would like to pause for some time and understand, why do we use image retrieval? We are searching for similar image. How is it helping me? Right? So suppose this it's a crime scene investigation and you click some photographs. So if you look through retrieval for those photographs, maybe you are able to identify two similar crime scenes. Maybe you're able to identify a pattern, something that you could not notice in the first place. When you are talking about a medical database, right? As a doctor, if I'm looking at a scan and I can look at similar scans which have been captured previously along with their history, that yes, these scans look similar and this one had this disease, this one had no disease. So that actually helps me in the diagnosis. Then natural databases. So I have a picture in mind. I say that I want to go to somewhere which looks like this. So I have an imaginative picture and I say I want to go to this place. So maybe I can search it up and I get a lot of different places, options, and I can see where I want to go, where I do not want to go. Okay. Face databases retrieval is essentially retrieving the images of the same person. So you give a face image as input and your retrieval results are essentially the images for the same person. So this is how the retrieval can actually help. So some of the database images, they look like this. From Coral 10K, these are the database images, sample images. And the results, I mean the kind of precision values that we can get as a function of number of retrieved images. Won't spend much time on this again. This is a example of some texture images and the results for that. Then this is a very popular database for face, which has been captured under different pose orientation, different illumination conditions. So if you are still able to figure out, then that's great, right? So the same person in different poses, in different lighting conditions. So that is the database here. Then you can get very good, like 100% results here. So this is in general, how does an image retrieval system look like? So you browse for an input image, then whatever image is given, you extract features out of it. You already have feature sets from the database images. These are compared, and on the basis of similarity, the results are shown. So I had given this face image and these are the results I am getting. Person of the same image from the data. So this is a typical user query system used for image retrieval. In the last, I would like to conclude by saying that in today's discussion, we have talked about first the communication systems and basics of image processing and trying to understand why do we have to talk about image processing at all. So how does it play a role and why would it become more important? Because as we go further, there would be even more applications based on live video streams or automated operations being done on the images. Then some pattern based features we have discussed. Further, I would like to say machine learning algorithms are also being used in CVI. Yeah. It's not that always you have to extract the features handcrafted. So handcrafted were the three, four what we have discussed. So machine learning systems, neural networks could also be used for the purpose. And whatever features we understand are good, we can actually pass them input to these systems to make the job even more easier. Right? These are some of the references. Thank you. But before I close, I would like to show you this. This is one of the image retrieval systems, and let us try to do a search here on the basis of an image. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer that.
Thank you so much, Sir Amit sir. Dear participants, if any query, write in the chat box. Is there,
Yes, ma'am.
what is the DIF between image retrieval and augmentation?
Sorry, what was that?
I'm repeating.
What is the difference between
Yeah,
augmentation?
yeah,
Augmentation is absolutely something different. Augmentation is when you're trying to add some information onto something, right? Retrieval is it is just like a search, right? Augmentation is when you're trying to add some information to something.
Good morning, sir. Hello.
I hope
Good morning,
that
sir. Hello. Good morning, sir.
yes,
Good
yes,
morning, sir.
ma'am.
So this is Monica. This is Monica from Noida. Actually, sir, I want to know if you can just name few of the AI-based algorithms to be applied for image processing. If you can name few of the algorithms, sir, because it was mentioned in the slide as well.
See, what happens is there is there are some popular competitions which are held by very reputed groups. I would suggest if you can follow those competitions. For example, ImageNet is a very popular convolution network which is being used, and there are many more. So there are some competitions because these things change very fast. right? So there is GoogleNet, there is ImageNet. There are many popular convolutional neural networks which are currently being used. But if you could follow some conferences which are dealing with these competitions, then you would be able to stay more updated. For example, another conference that you could follow is CVPR. CVPR is a reputed conference in this area.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Amit sir. It's a
So we
really
got the
nice session.
just yeah just a second, ma'am. I just
Yeah,
wanted to share these results.
sure, sir.
So these are the retrieval results that we are getting, right, on the basis of your search, right? So I gave this image as input, right? And these are your results, the retrieval results, right? We just saw them. Okay. I think we have another question. Can I go ahead and answer that? So, Mohammad Abul has a question. So I think we discussed this in the presentation as well, that image retrieval is essentially a image based search, and it can have various use cases. For example, we said for a doctor to look for similar scans of earlier patients, or maybe for a crime scene crime scene description, if you're trying to look for similar crime scenes which have happened earlier, or on the basis of a given image you want to search for some natural scenes in various places which depict this kind of a image that you have in mind. So these are just some of the applications where a image based search can actually make a sense. Or maybe you say that you give an image of of a person, say Roger Federer, and then you say you want some similar images. So those kind of things could be done using image retrieval.
Again, I requested all participants kindly switch on camera for a group photograph. Thank you once again. And dear participants,
Thank you very much.
yeah. Now attendance link is open. So enter the attendance for we will open for 30 minutes only for session 1. So thank you everyone, and for next session we will on at 11:45. Thank you.
Thank you very much.